In the fight for more climate protection, the EU Parliament wants to ban the sale of new cars with combustion engines from 2035. A majority of MEPs voted in Strasbourg on Wednesday that from the middle of the next decade, manufacturers will only be allowed to bring cars and vans onto the market that do not emit any greenhouse gases that are harmful to the climate. Before such a regulation can come into force, Parliament still has to come to an agreement with the EU member states. At the end of the month, the member states want to determine their position on a sales ban for petrol and diesel cars. After that, both EU institutions would have to find a compromise so that the requirement can come into force at all. After the vote, German Greens MP Michael Bloss said on Wednesday, "We have decided in favor of the future of Europe as an automotive location. In the future, the best electric cars and the latest batteries would come from Europe." His Christian Democrat colleague Jens Giesecke sees that very differently. Unfortunately, the Greens, Liberals and Social Democrats prefer to put everything on the electric mobility card. In his own words, he fears for Europe's competitiveness and numerous jobs. But he conceded the ban on combustion engines in 2035 will probably no longer be preventable. The German Association of the Automotive Industry are also critical of the decision, as are the car clubs here. It would have been better to also open up a perspective for combustion engines that are fueled in a climate-neutral manner. According to VDA President Hildegard Müller, the decision does not want to accept that there is insufficient charging infrastructure for electric cars in large parts of Europe. On Wednesday, MEPs also advocated that no climate-friendly synthetic fuels can be counted. With these, a classic combustion engine could be operated in a climate-neutral manner. However, critics fear that there is already too little of the green fuel for aviation and shipping, which are less easy to run electrically than cars or vans. Environmental organizations, they mostly welcomed the results. Today, the European Parliament sent a clear signal in the direction of a change in drive systems, said Jens Hilgenberg, the head of transport policy at the BUND. The internal combustion engine is a phased-out model that must now be clear to everyone involved. From the organization NABU, it says, the EU combustion exit 2035 is a big step and a work order at the same time. The federal government must now take urgent measures to ensure that the goal is achieved. The measure does not go far enough for the German environmental aid, which calls for an end to combustion engines as early as 2030. Further votes on the so-called Fit for 55 legislative package also took place on Wednesday, with which the EU aims to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 55% by 2030 compared to 1990 levels and to become climate neutral by 2050. A reform of EU emissions trading, the heart of European climate policy, initially failed. A majority of MEPs rejected the planned extension of the system to buildings and traffic because they find the specifications too lax. The law was referred back to the Environment Committee for a new compromise. Important votes on a CO2 tariff at the EU's external borders and the Climate Social Fund for low-income households have been postponed. Christian Democrat MEP Peter Liese, who is responsible for negotiating the dossier in the EU Parliament, said, "The Social Democrats and the Greens have not lived up to their responsibility for climate protection." In his opinion, the proposal would have tightened the Commission proposal in many places and meant more climate protection. From the point of view of the Greens and Social Democrats, on the other hand, the text was ultimately not ambitious enough. The European Parliament rejects the emissions trading softened by the fossil lobby and alliance, said Green politician Michael Bloss. The Environment Committee had previously voted to reduce emissions of greenhouse gases covered by emissions trading by 67% by 2030. However, a majority in Parliament ultimately voted in favor of an amendment proposed by the Conservative EPP for a 63% reduction. The Christian Democratic EPP tried with the right side of the House to water down the Commission's proposal wherever possible, said MEP Vulcan from the Social Democrats. Emissions trading is one of the most important instruments for reducing climate-damaging emissions and in the fight against climate change. For example, parts of industry or electricity producers have to pay for the emission of gases such as carbon dioxide or CO2. Among other things, the plan was to extend it to commercial buildings and transport and to reduce emissions more quickly. The planned EU border adjustment mechanism, a kind of import tariff on CO2 emissions from goods, and the Climate Social Fund for low-income households are, as I said, also on hold for the time being, as they are closely related to emissions trading. How long it could take before Parliament can vote on a new compromise is still open. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.